right, so we've got audio, we've got video, everything's working. So this might actually be a stream where everything, for once, maybe works correctly. What's up, everyone? Welcome to the stream. It's good to see y'all here. Man, I am really excited about tonight. So, last stream on Monday night, we finished up the angel. Or Asmar. She's right there on the top of my little display. And I had the company that designs a lot of the miniatures that I paint, called Loot Studios. They actually reached out to me earlier today and asked to use that in some of their weekly highlights. So that was some super cool piece of news that I got today, that they thought it was good enough to actually highlight as one of their community painters. So I thought that was really, really cool and exciting. So that's happening. But today we're going to be painting another one of Loot Studios miniatures with the 75 millimeter size. And this is actually, I kind of put it to a vote on the TOI server, and everybody wanted this particular one. So without further ado, we've got our boy here. This is a Skeleton Pirate by Loot Studios. And my goodness, it looks so freaking sick. I absolutely love this model. One of the cool things about it is just a lot of the detail. Like, you can't really see it too terribly well on this camera. But the spine even has like all of the vertebrae and all those cool little details. This cloak has some really cool textures on it. You can kind of see it with the Zenithal highlight I did with all of this like cool burned holes and a bunch of really neat skulls on the bottom. Some metal that we can do some like rusty non-metallic metal to, and I think it's just gonna look super, super cool. So I'm really excited about this one. For some reason my camera is being stupid today. Stand by. Every so often I use a Logitech Brio for my hand cam, and every so often it resets all of my settings. I don't know why. It's really annoying though. But it is what it is. So without further ado, let's go ahead and open up the wet palette and start getting our colors. So what I'm thinking for this is kind of a worn out red coat with like some points on this where it looks like it's been rubbing and tearing and really being worn and used. He's got this like little skirt, and then underneath the skirt some pantaloons. I guess that's what you call them. So the colors I'm thinking for those are going to be kind of an aqua, right? Exactly. Is going to be an aqua blue. So kind of more of a complementary color there. And then of course the bone is going to be bone. All the leather is going to be brown, but I think that's going to be a really cool looking miniature. So we're going to go with kind of a faded red, kind of a maroon color for the coat, blue for the pants, and then everything else is kind of self-explanatory. So let's go ahead and start getting our palette set up. First thing I'm going to do, to get a maroon, at least in my experience, I've kind of had to basically use a bright red and then desaturate it. So I'm going to start with white because I've mentioned this on stream before, that whenever you add white or black, it just doesn't just lighten or darken colors, it desaturates it as well. So even if we don't want a bright color, simply adding white will desaturate it for us. We'll use some more of the awesome black gray that I use a lot for darkening up colors, because it's not totally black, so it's not as intense. And then we'll use we'll use some of this violet red by I mean, that could be pretty cool to paint them gold. I'm not I think that would have worked really well, except there's more than just skulls. There's also like femurs. Some of the skulls are cracked and stuff like that. So I'm not sure how well that would work, but I do like the idea. I don't know. something to think about. I'm really going to focus on the mini first and then the base later. So we'll see. Maybe we'll get to it and it'll just look super cool. First things first, to get my brush out, I'm going to be using a rather large brush because we're covering a lot of surface area. So now we're just going to start working in the different shades of color, trying to get our maroon. And I discovered a really cool tool today that I'm going to start using a lot more. It's called Adobe Color. And essentially, it's like an automated color wheel that you can go in and you can plug in your colors along with other settings and things that you want. Ooh, that was way too much white. Like me. And you can select different colors and things like that. And it will give you, you can set it to like, hey, I want a complementary, or I want a split complementary, a triad, or a box, or analogous, or shaded, or compound, or monochromatic, and all these different settings. So that's what I actually used for this. I knew I wanted kind of a faded red for the coat, and so I just plugged that in, and it gave me all the different colors that I might want to use. Bring up the saturation a little bit more. Yeah, I'm not sure. This may not be recoverable, honestly, which is unfortunate. Every so often I get to mixing colors and I get carried away with one thing or another. Add too much of one color and it's really hard to get back from that. We'll try to recover this, but it may not be recoverable. Try adding a bit more red, and if this doesn't work, then we'll have to start over. I think plum would work well, and that's kind of what I was getting to, more of the color I was getting here, more of a plum. But I think adding that red, bringing up the saturation of the red a little bit more, is giving me exactly what I want, or close to it at least. And if it turns out to not be what I want, we can always go back and change it, which is the beauty of painting, right? So I'm looking at color here, trying to kind of figure out how to bring out more of that maroon color versus kind of this pale dark pink. I might simply need to add a different color, like so I'm very bad at color theory, but from what I understand, add the complementary color, you'll get gray, essentially. If you add an analogous color, it'll bring out the saturation a little bit. And looking at my shaders here, I think if I added just a touch of yellow, we might be able to get back to where I want to be. Maybe. Just a little bit. And that did pretty much exactly what I wanted it to. So that's nice. See, now I need to know what the doctor was describing. As always, this is going to be our base coat. And what I really like about this color so far is it really does give me kind of that faded dark red look versus like that just regular red, I guess. So again, that almost like desaturated, worn out look that clothes get after a while. At this point, I'm not too worried about where the paint goes. I'm more worried about coverage and getting everything covered. Yeah, exactly. Exactly my thinking. Not only that, but this is also a skeleton pirate, right? So we have no idea when the last time he actually changed was. It could have been wearing the same clothing for the past 100 years on a deserted island for all we know. Oh look, he's got like a little skull on his shoulder. Maybe I'll paint this skull gold. The one on his shoulder. I think that would look pretty cool. Would be really cool too is to kind of add a bit of a patina to that gold, but I genuinely cannot for the life of me, now that I think about it, remember what a patinaed gold looks like. Because like if a patina for bronze or brass is blue, patina for steel is obviously, you know, a rust, a red, orange. But I don't remember what gold looks like. Yep, so I'm going to be doing that. So if you see some of these like holes and stuff like that, I'm going to be adding burn marks around those, almost as if his coat had caught on fire at some point. And then there's like these see-through holes right here that you can see through his arm. Put some burn marks on those as well. So yeah, that's actually exactly what I was planning on doing. Great minds think alike, right? It's kind of weird. Some of these these two skulls on his shoulders almost look like monkeys. It's kind of weird. I haven't decided because obviously like we could go standard black and kind of do like that, you know, typical like 1800s navy look. We could do brown and make it like a leather type hat. I think those are the two colors that I've narrowed down personally. Um, I don't think any other color would really make sense. And then he's also got this trim on him too. I'm not entirely sure what I want to do with the trim. I could do like a pale yellow, almost represent like it maybe used to be like gold, or like a gold color, not necessarily gold. Here comes the fun part, trying to get inside the cloak. That's what he said. Ooh, that's a good idea. I know this is hard for y'all to see, but I'm just trying to get inside the cloak. Painted. And since we're at the beginning of the stages of this miniature, like really the sky's the limit. We could pretty much do whatever we want with it. But I do like the idea of like that human skin. Kind of fits the motif. Oh, dude, I don't care about dark. Trust me. Has to have a golden edge? Why is that? Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Are you trying to get me to paint Captain Hook? Okay. Okay, Vast decided now that it wants to send me an advertisement. Get out of here. And again, I don't really care what this looks like too much right now. Just going to try to get a good coverage. So if we get a little bit of cross painting, I guess you could say. Okay, now I'm gonna let that dry and we're gonna move on to the actual skeleton itself. So for that, we're gonna start off, where are you at? With a little bit of bone shadow from Reaper. It's kind of a dark tan, almost khaki kind of look. And this is going to serve as our base coat for the skeleton once we actually put it back on our stand here. There we go. He may have been in a previous life. Now that he's been denied the afterlife, all that stuff that he thought would bring him happiness and joy now serves to weigh him down to the depths of the ocean. always wondered, like, when it comes down to it, people that spent their whole lives looking for wealth or adventure, when they finally find it, what do they feel? Like everybody says, like, oh, they just keep going, and like it's never-ending search or whatever. But I'd really love to sit down with somebody who, like an older gentleman who spent their entire lives looking for wealth, and just see what they think. When you get to be 70, 80 years old, does it even matter anymore? Or are they still chasing it? Did all that chasing really bring them happiness? Or did it just bring more stuff, right? I'm not necessarily talking about people who are quote unquote wealthy, but I'm talking about like people who spent their entire lives looking for and trampling on other people for wealth. Yeah. Because I mean, for a lot of people, that's it, right? It's not necessarily about making money. It's about being able to know when to make the right investments, or know what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. And less about the money itself. I mean, you got to think though, like, to some extent it does, right? To some extent it's definitely about the thrill of the fight, right? The hunt. But isn't it also about the money itself? Or else why wouldn't you find the same kind of thrill for, like, say, actual hunting? Like hunting deer or something like that. Or big game hunting. Dangerous game hunting. What is it about money that gives them that thrill? And for our pirate here, what made him willing to die to obtain that wealth? Yeah. Yeah, I guess so. So it's almost like this. If something is always running away from you, it's the thrill of the chase. It's that desire to obtain something that is unobtainable for so many people. So I'm also thinking, because a lot of this dark bone isn't going to be terribly visible or terribly obvious once the rest of it is painted, because I'm going to do a lot of highlighting, especially around the rib cage, on the face, and a little bit on the spine here. So these like pants here that are underneath this skirt, thinking also to paint it the same shade of color, maybe a touch darker, maybe add a little bit of red to kind of pull everything together. So I'm going to pull some of this aside. Just going to grab a little bit of this red. Mix it together to kind of get a hybrid between the two. That would be cool, but yeah, I think number one, I think he's been dead too long. But also, like, imagine what like salt in constant humidity does to a corpse. Good Lord, I just realized how dark this stream is going to be. talking about death and people dying trying to find money, and it's, you know, they never succeed. It's only a mildly depressing, right? So now that that's base coated, we'll move on to our shade for the skirt, which we're going to be using the Reaper Ocean Triad for this. So we'll start off with the darkest color, just like we are with the others, and move our way up. You know what, before I do that, I'm also going to desaturate this a tad with some white. A little bit of dark brown, or dark gray. I'm not that good at freehand work to be comfortable trying to do a plaid pattern. I like where your head's at, but I am not there yet. It would look so incredibly sloppy, it would be painful to watch. I like that color combination, man. Whew. So, this is how you know I'm getting way too far into this hobby. I was literally shopping today trying to figure out what the prices of buying full paint lines is. It's like, instead of buying individual bottles from a hobby store whenever I need it, just buy an entire paint line from a company. Come to find out, it's not cheap. Interesting. And then as he adds to his collection, obviously some of the clothes begin to wear out and die as well. So he just keeps replacing them, which would also mean that some of this clothing would naturally be different color and maybe clash because he's just stealing it from other people. That is a really cool idea. So I'm going to go ahead and take some of this, trying to figure out what exact color I want to do this trim. I know I want to do it like a pale yellow, but I'm trying to figure out if I want to do it like more like a golden yellow and just desaturate it, or do a bright yellow. I think I'm going to do the gold yellow and desaturate it. Yeah. Oh, his victims are definitely at his feet, 100%. only thing I don't like about that white. It is very, very difficult to mix because it's so thick. And evidently, this black gray has a lot of blue in it because instead of desaturating yellow, I just got freaking green. Puke green. With that Kratos face? As in like Kratos from God of War, right? So how would I do that? Because Kratos' tattoos are on his face. So how would I make it like Kratos? Because he doesn't. The skulls don't have skin. How would you do that? I think it can be done. I'm just trying to figure out how. I'd also have to, because I've never owned a PlayStation, so I've actually never played God of War. So I genuinely would have to research and figure out exactly what those tattoos look like, because I have no clue. I like that color, that yellow, for the trim. I think it looks good. Fair. Trust me, not all of my ideas are good either. Some of them are definitely flops. Alright. There's a bit of cloth there I missed. There we go. Alright, so I want to go ahead and do... I think the first coat coverage on this is on the cloak is fine, or the jacket is fine. But I do want to do a second coat on my actual skeleton. Because there are some places that are looking kind of light. Really the most important part with this color is going to be the recesses, so I want to make sure those are nice and dark. Because then what we'll do is we'll come up with a just a regular like skeleton color to do the like the midtones, and then we'll use a polished bone to do a lot of the highlights and really make it look shiny, almost like it's been sun bleached. What do y'all think? I think he's looking good so far. Alright, let's knock out some of this leather real quick. So what I want to do is grab some of my leather brown. I want to use some of this muddy brown because this muddy brown has a little bit of a red tint to it. And then we'll use the leather brown to lighten it up a little bit. Just a touch. And I'm going to switch out my big brush for my less big brush. There's the color I'm looking for right there. This is such a cool model. Like, just a lot of the detail that was in thought that was put into this by the sculptors is just amazing. I'm so glad that I am able to actually print this out and paint it because it looks super sweet. And I'm glad that those of y'all who actually voted for this, voted for it. I say voted for it. It was literally like 3 of y'all, and I was like, okay, it doesn't take much to convince me. Yep, I printed it out of my Elegoo Saturn 3D printer. So yep, it's a resin print. Pretty much all of the minis that I'll be doing on stream, because they're going to be these larger sized miniatures, are going to be 3D printed. I might, if I find some that I really like, buy some. Or if I'm like DMing a campaign and I don't feel like printing, wasting the time to print it, and I just want to go and buy one, I'll do a smaller one. But 90% I'd say of the miniatures that I paint are 3D printed. In fact, I actually bought my 3D printer specifically for this hobby. And the resin color I've used a couple different resin colors, but the one I always keep coming back to is Elegoo's water washable ceramic gray, because it's a good neutral color, and it primes really, really easily, and it gives me some good detail. At least I think it gives me some pretty good detail. But I've also used some like fast resins in the past by, what are they, 3D Makers, I think is what it's called. I didn't really like it. Supposedly it was water washable, but I could never get it to actually clean up well. I've also used Elegoo, some different colors by Elegoo. For instance, Bex's miniature was printed with Elegoo's water washable clear blue, which, man, looks really good. Not at all. Basically what I do is I remove the supports I'll use either clippers or a hobby knife to remove any support material that's left over, because they look like little nubs. But as far as like the big surface areas, like all these smooth surface areas, I haven't sanded this down at all. It's just resin prints, you don't really get print lines like you would with a filament printer. Which is kind of why I went with a resin printer at first. The first 3D printer I got was a resin printer. I have a filament printer now, because 3D printing in and of itself is a hobby. But all of my miniatures are going to be done in resin, because it's, as you can see, the detail is just insane. The layer height for a resin print is generally around 0.05 millimeters, or I think it's 5 microns, something like that. Incredibly small, so you really don't get the same kind of layer lines that you see with FDM printers that are printing at 0.5 millimeters. So one thing I am excited about this miniature is I don't have to worry about messing up eyes. I swear, eyes are the most difficult thing to do on any kind of miniature. It depends. So with resin printing, it depends on the height, right? So a miniature of this scale typically takes around 4 hours. Some of the smaller miniatures, like the 28 millimeter miniatures that you would use on a tabletop, those take like an hour and a half, 2 hours. So somewhere around there. I've done larger resin prints, like I did a statuette that took me all in all about 20 to 30 hours. But I also used a little bit of my FDM printer on it as well, because there were parts of it, like the base, that wouldn't fit on the printer I had at the time. Yeah, so I buy a lot of the actual 3D print files from a company called Loot Studios. They make, in my opinion, some of the best 3D printable characters and sculpts. I've also gotten some from a company called Lord of the Print. If you're just looking for like a miniature and you're not looking for basically an art piece like this, you could go on to somewhere like Thingiverse, which is a 3D printing sharing platform where you go and share files. And I've gotten stuff there for free and then painted it. So it really just depends on what you're looking for. So yes, I do pay for some, and some I get for free, because you can just download them, because the makers provide them for free. So it's not like stealing or anything like that. So this one I did pay for, but it's incredibly cheap. So Loot Studios is a subscription, and it is, what is it? It's $15 a month, and you get like 30 or 40 files per month. And all of them are of the same detail level. With everything, like there are some months that I would say are hit and miss, just because I'm not really into something. Like they did one that was like Egyptian themed. I own it because it's part of the monthly subscription, but I wasn't like, oh, I gotta paint this, I was more like, oh, that's kind of cool, it's Egyptian themed. But Yeah, I hope that answers your question. Loot, as in Loot. And then there's also Archvillain Games. Makes some really good prints. I don't buy from them mostly because a lot of theirs are villain themed. Loot does both. Like their packs usually are split between two. Like one half of it is villains, and then you'll have like 4 heroes, and then you'll have some 3D printable terrain. So they kind of give you a bunch for what you're paying. But in my opinion, if you're just getting into the hobby of 3D printing and miniature painting, you know, you do you, but I would personally get a few free models or buy something from your local shop and see if you like it, because then you have no investment, right? Or very little investment. And then if you decide to like it, you know, back someone like Loot Studios or Archvillain Games or there's numerous companies that sculpt and sell the STL files. Just Loot happens to be my personal favorite. Okay. Really liking how this is looking so far. Go ahead and toss some more paint on these pants here. Yeah, and I have it. It's huge, and I want to print it out on my filament printer, but it is massive. It's literally like to scale for 32 millimeter miniatures, right? So tabletop miniatures. I think it's 3 levels, and it's such a cool ship. But yeah, it's massive, and it's going to take a long time to print, which is why I haven't started yet. All right, now I'm going to do some quick corrections here. Just a couple holidays. And one of the things I love about Loot Studios is just there's a lot of value that comes with it, because the amount of sculpts you get for the price is amazing. You know, it's not terribly expensive. It's not cheap, but it's not terribly expensive. And everything that I've gotten from them has just been the absolute best quality. And you know that I'm not being paid for them, because there's no way that they would pay for somebody who averages 4 views on Twitch and none on YouTube. I don't think they will. I've never seen anything on their website that advertises customs. They might. It's worth an ask, but I've never seen them do it. So I genuinely don't know one way or the other. Okay, so let's go for the hat. I'm trying to think of how I want to do this, because I do like the idea of it being made from human skin. like putting tattoos and freehand tattoos and stuff on it. Because then we also have these little pouches on the side. Although I think those would just be the same color as the coat. But I will say there's probably somebody on, you know, like Etsy or Fiverr who would be willing to custom make you miniatures and custom sculpts. Loot Studios may, I've just never asked them. And it's not something they advertise. I'd imagine it'd be a lot more expensive than what they charge for the actual monthly subscription. Because with the monthly subscription, they're going to be making tons of money because there's a ton of subscribers. But with a single custom miniature, you know, my guess is it'd be a lot more expensive. On the hat? I don't know. That might make it look a little too comical. Depending on how I would do it. I mean, it's certainly an option. I just don't know how I do it without making it look silly, right? Because we want to make this guy look scary, not silly. So I'm wondering how. I mean, there's got to be a way, right? Again, keep in mind that my freehand is not that great. Mostly because I just haven't done much of it. I should probably start practicing because really freehand is, especially if I ever wanted to do like competitions, like painting competitions and stuff like that, freehand is really what's going to set a miniature apart from all the rest. Alright, so what I want to do now is I want to start building up my layers on the cloak. So we'll start adding a little bit more white, pulling away some of this burgundy here, start lightening it up. Again, I'm not really going to be adding any more red because I want this to stay desaturated because I want it to look worn and old. So this right here is going to be our mid-tone. Start laying this down on everything but the absolute most deep recesses. This is my personal favorite part. base coating can get kind of boring, but seeing the miniature come alive when doing all of your highlights and really starting to give it dimension, really starting to see it take on a character of its own and a life of its own. That's really what it's all about for me, honestly. Which is probably why I like giving all of my miniatures backstories. Just kind of makes it a little bit more interesting, right? One of the things I'm doing here is I'm really not really bothering trying to make a straight line, because if this thing is worn and old, then it would be worn out in different places, right? It wouldn't ever look uniform. So I'm just going to paint it in such a way that it looks like it's been scraped up and beat up and it's not uniform anymore. That all these different colors have begun to fade away. Almost getting to the point where I'm not really dry brushing, but I'm getting very, very close in the way that I'm doing this. I'm not looking for full coverage. I'm really just very quickly pushing and pulling my brush across the surface just to get that nice texture. Scratchy. It looks a little too uniform. I actually probably could have used a dry brush for this, but wanted to have a little bit more control over where the paint's going, and a dry brush can get kind of ornery. Kind of like, I think it was a Calico suggested, we're definitely going to be adding some burn marks to some of these holes and around the edges. I think that's going to look super, super, super cool. How bad is it that my standard for what look is and isn't acceptable is it's not terrible? Well, it doesn't look terrible, therefore it's good enough. Here on these cusps, because we have much smaller detail, it's going to be a little bit harder to get that same texture. So I'm going to be a little bit more careful with that than I would with the rest of it. Fair enough. Highlight here. All right, so that is our first highlight coat. So what I'm going to do now, so there are a few areas where I do want the blending to be a bit more progressive, and we still have a couple sharp edges. So grab a little bit of this, and as always, create a glaze. A little bit too much water, not enough pigment. There we go. That almost has, well, I'm not seeing any pigmentation there, so obviously not enough. Wait for that to dry before we put on our next, and we can move on to our mid-tone for the skirt here. And like we did with the previous color, grab a bit of white, just a touch of this black, or I guess it's a black gray. Add it in to bring down saturation. And the further towards white we go, the more desaturated I want this, right? So by the time we get to our final highlight, I want this to be almost completely white, with just a touch of brown. Now, unlike our layers on our coat, those layers are going to be significantly smaller as far as where they're at. I'm going to grab my smaller brush here because we're going to get into a little bit finer detail. With the same thing, I'm just going to use that cross hatch pattern. One of the things that I'm doing is I'm leaving a little bit of that undercoat exposed, almost to give it a fabric texture feel to it. And what's interesting is I literally have no idea what I'm doing here, but somehow it's working. I feel like that's been half of my miniature painting experience, is like, I don't know what I'm doing, but somehow it looks good, so I just keep doing it. Yeah, I think that's looking nice. I'm doing the opposite direction on this little piece here, just to kind of give it some, make it look like it used to be going in the same direction as the rest of the fabric, but it got torn somehow. Yeah, I think that looks nice. And I know y'all can't see it too terribly well, but I will definitely be posting pictures, as always, of our progress tonight. Alright, I'm going to return to my glaze here. Glaze on the back is probably dried enough so that we can go in for a second coat. And again, the big thing here is to always move in the same direction. You never want to go in the opposite direction that you're glazing. That just doesn't look good. All right, so with that, we're going to move on to our brightest highlight. And again, I want this to be very, very close to pure white. And for the texturing, I'm really going to use my smaller brush here because I want to get kind of these small cross hatches going. And like I said before, I have no idea what I'm doing. Let's just hope it looks good. That is a fair point, Cal. That is a very fair... I can't say Cal now because there are two Cals in chat. That is a fair point, Calico. just kind of scattered like that. Just to kind of give it a bit of a torn feel to it. This really isn't necessarily a highlight like I would normally do. This is more of a texturing thing. Yeah, I think that's looking pretty worn. Well, funny you should say that, Calico, like, as far as the disappointing yourself. I often find that when I'm most disappointed or frustrated in something that I'm doing is when it's something that I absolutely know exactly what should be happening and it doesn't, right? Like something, some task or something I've done 1,000 times, but for whatever reason, it's just not working this one time. Like that for me is one of the most frustrating things. I'll have to Google what that is because I'm not exactly familiar with that particular design. And keep in mind that if it's a little too complex, I might not be able to actually do it. More than willing to try. And I may not use, if I do end up doing that, I may not use paint. I may use what's known as a micro marker or micro pen, I should say. So it's basically just a super small marker. That's what I do like if I'm writing or if I'm adding like a script. That's what I'll use. Gotcha, okay. I'll probably be something that I do last, if and when. Mostly because that's not something that I want to do now and then mess it up and have to repaint over it. So what I'll do is probably off stream, I'll go look it up, practice it a little bit, and then come back next time on Monday. Unless I decide to do another impromptu stream. Dude, I swear that miniature that I painted on Sunday and Monday, like, dude, that was so much fun. It was such a great learning process. And I think I really like the results. So what I'm going back and doing here is I'm adding almost like a core to the wear pattern, so that the center of it is a little bit stronger than the edges. Still using the same technique of just moving the brush back and forth at random intervals, but it's just going to make it look a little bit more Well, I guess just a little bit more. Is the best way to describe it. At least I hope it will. And the parts that you can see here where I'm not really putting anything, that is one of the scorch marks that I'm going to be doing. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And one of the cool things about that process, right, is the fact that you have absolutely no clue what's going on, but somehow everything works, and it's just like, oh, that's the greatest thing ever. Like don't get me wrong, I do have a mental image of what I want this to look like. But I think the difference is I just don't know how to achieve that mental image. So I'm just trying different things. So this is becoming like one of those times where the more and more I do on this miniature, the more and more excited I'm getting about it. It's kind of apprehensive at first because I was like, I'm not really into the whole pirate theme. But man, this thing is so cool. Again, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. Not earlier, but like I feel like I've repeated this every single stream. Pushing myself to do things that I don't necessarily like to do is always beneficial. Because I wouldn't have known how to make clothing look worn unless I actually painted a miniature that clothing needs to look worn. So it pushes me to become better. Like it. Cool, 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 cool. I think there are a few points here where I do want to smooth it out just a touch, especially where it transitions into the darker color. So I just want to smooth it out just a hair. And I'm trying to do it in a way that kind of conveys that it's still old and worn. So I'm kind of doing it at random intervals, so some of it will look smooth, some of it will look sharp. I'm just blending in some of these edges here. I think on this is what my eye is noticing is it's noticing some of these edges are, some of the wear marks are a little bit large. So yeah. Why is that, Cal? The snacks Cal, not the other Cal. Ah, gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that might be a little bit easier than saying, no, not that cow, the other cow, but not that cow, the other cow. I think I've called you Callie before. Alright, it's the same thing. What we're going to do with the little skirt up here is we're going to take some of this almost white, and we're just going to do the same thing, but only on the very most raised spots. We're going to do so a little bit more sparingly, so our details here are a little bit more fine. I'm going to be focusing a lot of this on, again, just the raised edges, but I'm also going to be, on this one, focusing on the edges of the cloth, because that's going to be the most torn and tattered. So this is going to take the place of what I would normally do here as an edge highlight to kind of emphasize, well, the edges. But since the edges are supposed to be torn and tattered, instead we'll do this little, I don't know what you call this technique, and I dropped my brush. Like, actually, for real, just dropped my brush. That looks good. 1 second. Gotcha. All right, and just because I think that turned out really nice, I'm going to go back to the cloak here, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to start adding some of this to the edge to kind of make it look a little bit tattered. especially on these places where the cloak has been torn away. Why has the music stopped altogether? There we go. All right, so now that I think I've gotten that material nice, and I say that and immediately notice the spot that I missed. Looking a little empty there. All right, I think I'm going to start on the bone real quick now that I've gotten all my fabric done. Looking pretty good. Maybe. All right, so now let's go to the bone. So I'm going to be using some of, let's see, what do I want to use? I'll use some of this Ushabti bone. Hope I pronounced that right. By Citadel. And I'm going to use this as my mid-tone. So most of what I've already done with the shade is going to be covered up by this. So like all of the ribs, the very tops of the ribs are going to be this color. A lot of the skull, the sternum, anything that would be exposed to light, but I'm going to keep all these recesses that nice dark color. This is going to do, it's going to do a couple different things. First of all, it'll give me nice lighting effects, which is always nice. And it'll give me a little bit more contrast so the bones stick out a little bit more. It makes it a little bit more interesting. Again, I know I've repeated this several times, but we don't necessarily paint to make it look real. Paint to make it look good. If you were to see a real-life walking pirate skeleton, I doubt he would have a dark rib cage. He would just be see-through. But again, this helps us a little bit. Now, I'm also going to come in here to the spine and start painting a little bit on the this mid-tone on the front of the vertebrae. What I'm eventually going to do as well is I'm going to start mixing these colors as I get closer to the pelvis and closer to the sternum to kind of fade it out from our mid-tone back to our shade. One thing's about layering. Layering, you can get really nice, smooth transitions from color to color. It just depends on how many steps you use in between. So if I went from just one color straight to another color, it wouldn't look as good as if I made a nice transition from one color to the other with several steps in between. This transition a little bit better here. It's almost too subtle, and then it kind of jumps to that shadow color. Which is exactly what we don't want. We just want that peeking out there. And now time for the face. So very similar to the faces we've done before, anything with a surface that's pointing up will get painted. Anything with a surface pointing down will get shaded. And obviously with a model like this, specifically a skeleton, there's a lot of contrasting bits and pieces, right? There's a lot of empty space in the skull. So I'm not really afraid of how well these transition to an extent. Right? I'm not gonna really worry about them being super smooth. On some places I'm going to, on others I'm not. Yeah, and I haven't played Silent Hill, but I do know Silent Hill. Now is where I'm going to try to make some transitions here. So right here on this jawline. Use a bit of a wet blend. Wet blending is exactly what it sounds like. All I'm doing is taking two paints that haven't dried yet and I'm blending them together as they're wet. Not super worried about the transitions being extra smooth, but I do want them to be a little bit smooth. I'm not terribly happy with how this is looking as far as the transitions go. So I'm going to take back literally everything I just said about not having them be super smooth, and I'm going to make them super smooth. Or as smooth as I can make them right now. Not especially, mostly because I haven't really found any horrors. Hold on. Really interesting. $16th isn't bad. But yeah. So I'm not terribly into horror, not because I don't like it. It's just I've never really found anything that scares me, to be honest. Like, and I've watched a lot of horrors, slashers. None of it really scares me. Believe it or not, the one thing that I've watched that did scare me was an episode of Doctor Who. Mostly because it played on a fear that I already have, or have experienced, I should say. Versus, like, I'm not really afraid of ghosts. I'm not afraid of, like, ghouls or anything like that. Slasher movies can be fun, but they're not scary in my opinion. So yeah, if there's only 16, then yeah, for sure. But one thing that I've noticed is that this side of Twitch is super desaturated, which is kind of why I've one of the reasons why I really wanted to start this, because like I enjoy painting and I want other people to enjoy it as well. And if there's only a few people on Twitch actually streaming this, then hey, why not? Then more people can come and join the fun. So I'm curious as to who the other 15 on top of me are. Wow, that sounded wrong. So I had a little bit of a spillage over here with this little piece here, so just gonna fill that in. Yeah, I guess it would be considered that, huh? Cool. All right, so let's go over these rib cage. This rib cage again with our mid-tone, just to bring up the, keep saying saturation, but that's really what I'm doing. I'm just trying to give it a little bit more of an opaque feel, whereas before it was having a little bit of coverage issues, but you know what, that's okay. That's what second and third coats are for. Look, whenever Matt like announced that I was streaming on his Twitch, which I'm not sure why he did, but he did. Like, that's why I said that I feel like I am aggressively mediocre. All right, so now, yeah, I don't doubt it, because Warhammer is a lot of the painting hobbyists are Warhammer hobbyists. I mean, I am too. Like, I have my army sitting in the other room that I'm painting off stream. So I'm not surprised that that's mostly what it is at all. Not a ton of people in the fantasy genre. I know, like, there are YouTube creators like Ninjon, I think, streams. I know Miniac does. These are like big names in like the miniature painting scene, I guess you could call it. So yeah. So what I did is I took some Citadel's Pallid Flesh, and I'm mixing a little bit of the bone that I used earlier. I'm just going to come in and start highlighting up just the top edges of these ribs. And there's these little ridges on his sternum that I'm gonna highlight up too. Hey, Dirk, what's going on, man? Welcome, welcome. We're just painting up a nice pirate skeleton. Highlight here just to kind of accentuate certain parts of the skeleton. Like I said, the rib cage, or the spine, to make it like pop out a little bit more out of that darkness, and then just the tops of the and center of the rib cage, and then we'll go and do the actual skull, just the absolute top highlights here. Like around the eye sockets, bottom of the jaw, teeth, any edge that I might have, all gonna get highlighted. Like that. Hey, SJ, can you hear me now? Yeah, doesn't he look friendly? He looks like he's not going to steal your face all. So I was about to say, because I'm looking at my levels right now, and I'm very close to peaking. So I'm not gonna be able to turn it up much more than what I've got it without people's ears bleeding. Oh, that's such a dad joke, and I love it so much. So, I think what I'm going to do now is, I'm really happy with the way the skeleton is looking. There are a couple corrections I need to make inside the rib cage. messiness in there. Well, let me turn up the gain on my mic a little bit. So what I'm really trying to prevent is peaking. So I've turned up my gain on my microphone, and I've turned it up on the Streamlabs, so it's about as loud as I really want to get. Try repositioning the mic a little bit too. There we go. So just repositioning the mic so that it's more in front of me than behind me. It wasn't behind me. Anyway. Words are hard. All right, so I also forgot to do his hand here, so we're going to go back and do a little bit of highlighting on his hand. Pushing up that brightness with that first midtone, and then we'll come back with the same highlight color that we used on his ribcage to accentuate it. While that dries, I'm going to take a pure Pallid Witch Flesh instead of actually mixing it up, and I'm really just going to hit just strategic areas along the top of his ribcage. To bring out that brightness just a touch. And same thing on his face. I'm going to be really sparing with this, easy for me to say, with this stage of the highlighting, because we just want to make it look like we've got a few reflections. Don't want to make it look super bright. So SJ, quick question. Is it like more or less loud than it has been in the past? Interesting, because I haven't changed anything in my settings like at all. So I'm wondering why it's like that. Turn the music down a little bit, maybe that'll help. Can you hear me now? All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my highlight tone here. And I'm going to, because one thing I forgot to do is to put some of that wear on these pouch is. So I'm just going to do that real quick. Just going to add it to the edges to make it look like it's been worn for like decades on a deserted island somewhere. And same on the other side. There we go. All right, so what I think I'm going to do now is start, well, first of all, got a little bit of a hot spot here. Brighten that shadow up a little bit. All right, cool. So I still haven't decided on a color for the hat as far as like, I do like the skin idea that Cal had. I just don't know if I want to make it like a tan color or more of a brown, like it's been baked in the sun. But if I do brown, it's just going to read as leather versus skin. I think what I can do is take some of this leather brown and add some of my skin tone to it. And we'll see what it gets. Yeah, I think that'll work. And you know what? If it doesn't work, or if we don't like it, we can always paint over it. I'm trying to think too, it might be cool if I add a little bit of stitching on it, right? To almost look like it was skin that was stitched together to make the hat versus one big piece. And I can either darken or lighten each section depending on what I want and almost make it look like it was from different people. Cal, I am going to take that idea of yours and I'm going to run with it. I'm kind of getting excited about that now. I don't know. The plan right now is to paint it like human flesh, as almost as if this pirate took the skin of his enemies and made a hat out of it. And then I'm going to freehand some tattoos on it. And this was all Cal Snack's idea. He was like, why don't you do a skin hat? I'm like, that's a cool idea. I feel like that's a euphemism, but I'm not sure if it is or not. So this will obviously take a few more coats because I had a lot of black on this hat. And since we're using a lighter tone, it's going to take a couple of coats to make it, to give me good coverage on it and to actually make it read as this tone versus this over black. But like I mentioned, I'm really excited about this idea because I don't really do a ton of freehand work because I don't think I'm very good at it. But like I'm gonna have to now draw on stitch. I'm gonna have to freehand on stitches. I'm gonna have to do the tattoos themselves. I think it's gonna look dope. Hopefully, if I can do it justice. Bowing emote. Yeah, I don't have any emotes. Fair enough, right? So I'm not looking to be like a tattoo artist or anything like that. I'm trying to make it look rough, trying to make it look like one sailor got a cheap tattoo at some godforsaken port in the Caribbean, right? So you're absolutely right. I'm, not trying to make it look super amazing. And I want to do some research on it too because I want to figure out exactly what kinds of tattoos people were getting. Because I don't want to like do anything super anachronistic. But at the same time, I'm not super worried about whether or not it's historically accurate. All right, so I'm gonna take my micro pen, and as soon as it dries, I'm gonna start doing the stitching. But for now, I'm going to transition to some earth brown, and I'm just gonna really quick throw a coat of brown on his peg leg. And I think with this boy too, I'm going to use some of the lessons I learned from the last miniature in non-metallic metal. And I'm going to do his sword and his hook in non-metallic metal, except we're going to make it look nice and rusted and gross. I'm also thinking about doing some of this as like a brass, and of course brass is patina's blue, so I think the patina would kind of bring out and match what I did for his skirt here. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and switch out my water, because that's getting kind of nasty. Cool. I'm going to go ahead and just base coat. Oof. Why is this crusty? That was weird. I'm going to go ahead and block out this sword here. So we'll do some black here. And then we'll give it a highlight there, and then we'll do some more black there, and then on the back edge we'll do a inverse. And then we'll invert it again on the other side. So I'll take a little bit of white, I'll mix it in with my blue here to get kind of a oceany color. And this is what we'll use on our highlighted parts. Well, maybe I should wait till that darker color actually dries. All right, and then on the hook, this is going to be a little bit different because it's a different shape, but we'll do the bottom half this dark gray. And then we will fade to that brighter color. And it's going to be a transition on the hook too, because we have two undersides, right? So this is going to be an interesting thing to paint. So right now all I'm doing is blocking out my colors. I don't really care if the transitions are there. I just want to know where my highlights are going to be. There, so we have, oops, you couldn't see it, that side, and then the inverted on the other. And then we'll have the top of the hook. Didn't drop it, but my brush definitely took a swipe at the other bits of the miniature. It'd be a lot easier to fix than when I freaking dropped Mark in the paint. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to do the non-metallic metal, and then after I'm done the non-metallic metal, that's when I'll apply all of my the actual rust. And for this, I really want to make these transitions super smooth. One of the things that I've been told, at least, about non-metallic metal is that the more stark the contrast and the more sharp the lines and highlights are, the more it will read as shiny, and the less reflective it is, it will read more as having that smooth transition. So that's kind of what I'm going for here, or I will be going for, because I don't think I'll be able to get to it tonight. I might be able to get started, but I do want to take a little bit of this black here, or gray black, I should say, mix it with my ocean, my deep ocean. Just so that my highlight and my highlight and my shadow are all kind of congruent. I don't know if that's the right word, but I'm using it. We'll act like it's the one I needed to use. A little bit of water to help the mixing process. And we'll go back over these just to add a little bit more color. Alright, so next thing we're going to do is we're going to try to start smoothing out these transitions. To do that, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start moving this kind of a mid-tone between my highlight and my dark side. kind of a transition color. A lot of water in here, and I'm going to do what's called feathering. So I'm going to add a little bit of wet paint, very quickly wipe off my brush, and then I'm just going to use my brush to kind of move this paint back and forth between the light and the dark. And this is going to start my transition. So it's kind of like using a glaze. It does a very similar thing, but it's a little bit less involved. It takes fewer layers, basically. It's basically kind of like the wet blending that I was using earlier, except I'm only using one color instead of multiple colors. And I'm also, for this technique, I'm keeping my brush a little bit more moist than I would before. And we're just going to repeat that process in all these different spots. Just feather that paint. So this technique of wet blending, feathering, is almost like if you can imagine a hybrid between glazing, which is using that 50% water, 50% paint, and wet blending. So I'm pulling the paint across and I'm thinning it out so that the pigment begins to get less and less and less saturated, so that I'm blending it like I would with a wet blend, but I'm using it almost like a glaze. The goal here is just to start those transitions so that they can get a little bit smoother. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. Shocker. So we'll add in our color blocks. Like that. Except maybe keep it in frame so everyone can see it. You know, I was watching a video by a YouTuber called Miniac, and he's one of those big time like miniature painting YouTubers, and he also streams, and he was saying on one of his videos that he has the hardest time keeping stuff in frame and in focus made me feel a lot better that even the guys who do this for a living have a hard time. There we go. That transition is starting to look nice. And now what I'm going to do is, shocker, glaze some of these transitions just to make them a little bit smoother. So again, that 50% water, 50% paint. Testing on my thumb just to make sure everything looks nice. And we're just going to start blending in some of these edges. And then once we're done with the light, we'll do the same thing with the dark. Take some of our shade here. Add more water. A little bit more paint. There we go. And we're going to start blending in our dark side. By the way, if y'all have any questions or ideas, I am all ears. Yeah, I like those. I like that transition. I like the look too. I think it's looking super cool. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take that mid-tone that I used and create a glaze out of that. Just start blending a little bit more. think on this side of the blade, we're starting to get a little bit of a desaturation of the spots where this blue was, or put this blue originally. So I'm just going to really quick add in some more of that. Like that. Yeah, I think that's looking super cool. And then I'll have to destroy it. Somehow. We're going to try to get to read as rusty and old. But first, more layers. Try to get these transitions a little bit smoother. Because again, the smoother the transitions, the more the metal is going to look dull. And since this is supposed to be a rusty blade, we want it to look a little bit dull. But this is one of those techniques, right, that I was talking about the other day that's really popular in non-metallic metal. This kind of transition between light and dark on the blade. It's not at all realistic, but it looks super cool when it's done right. I don't know if I'm doing it right, but it can look really, really cool. So I'm going to add a little bit of white here. And I'm going to add a brighter highlight just on the very edge and in the very center of all my highlights. And this is going to give that illusion of sharpness. Kind of like how the edge of a blade reflects light. Then I'm going to add a little bit of this white just to the center of each one of these bright highlights, just to bring up that contrast just a tiny bit. To give it some nice reflections. And then, of course, we glaze. And again, notice that on none of this, I'm not using pure white on any of this. And part of the reason why I'm not is I don't want this to read as shiny. So the brighter the highlights, the more contrasting they are, the brighter it will read. So while I do want my highlights to be bright, I don't want them to be pure white. Alright, I think that's going to turn out really nicely. So now, again, I just have to figure out how I'm going to destroy it, all this hard work, and make it look rusty. It's got these nasty, like, gouges in it. So what I might do is take a little bit of rust and stipple it around those areas. And so stippling is literally just taking, like, a sponge or an old brush and just putting a bunch of dots around it. I might do that. I don't know. Because it would look weird for the sword to be nice and bright and shiny when the rest of the model is absolutely been distressed and looking like he's been much worse for wear. So, but for now, I'm going to take my micro pen and we're going to start adding some stitching to the hat. So first what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw straight lines. Or not straight lines, just lines. Like that. And I'm just going to put a little bit of stitching. Kind of like that. I don't know how well you can see it, but it's there, I promise. And guess what I did? I dropped my brush again. Oh. 2 streams ago, it was called Oops, I Dropped My Brush. I should have saved that for today. See, now I have to figure out how I'm going to do this, because the underside would match the outside, but that underside, the top, I should say, would match the underside, and that is very, very tight in there as far as the amount of space I have to work. And then trying to mirror what I've already done is going to be difficult. But you know what? I'm all about trying. Unfortunately, my pen can't reach in there. That's okay. Sorry, I realize you can't see what I'm doing. It's because I'm really trying to do some fine detail work. And it didn't turn out great, but you know what? That's half the adventure, right? The outside, I think, looks fine. And then once I've figured out the tattoos I'm going to do, I'll go ahead and do those. One thing I'll do now is start adding different skin tones. So I'm going to take my brown here, just pure brown, and kind of work it in to this little section here, but I'm going to leave near the stitching open because that would actually wear out faster. I'm going to take that color and do another section. Maybe this small one over here. And then let's add a little bit more of a deeper brown to this. To this color there. Add a darker patch here. Like that. Now I'll take some of this just pure brown here. Actually, it wouldn't be that dark, would it? It would be quite pale because it's dead skin. So we'll go to this bone color instead. All right, now we have to mirror what we just did on the top. Except we keep it in frame. Oh well. I made a mistake, but that's okay. We'll just go with it. Go back to our darker skin tone here. I apologize if I'm not doing this well. I'm very bad at darker skin tones, admittedly. Especially when I have to mix them myself. I'm genuinely just bad at skin tones, period. But especially darker or ethnic skin tones, I'm not that great at them. Although I'm not sure how much it matters for a literal skin hat. Alright, there's a patchwork skin hat. Let's do some of this darker brown here. Yeah, let's do that for the underneath, like just above the skull, just so that we can get some contrast between the skull and the hat, so that it doesn't read as the same. And now I need to go back and fix his freaking face because my brush got away from me. There we go. Easy fix. All right, well, we've gone almost 2 hours and 45 minutes. I think we've made some really good progress on him. I think he's looking super cool. Like I said, off stream, I'm going to start researching some tattoos that I can start decorating his skin hat with. And we will see what we can find. And we'll come back with some reference photos on Monday. But thank you all for coming and joining me with Mr. Pirate Skeleton Face here. I'm really liking this model the more I paint it. We'll do some more with non-metallic metal next time. So he's got these skulls on his shoulders that I think I'm going to paint gold. He's got buckles and straps and things like that we're also going to be painting with non-metallic metal. But I think he's turning out great. And yeah, so thank you so much for joining me and just relaxing and painting some cool miniatures. So until next time, I'll see you later.